She was laughing. The watch, his grandfather's legacy, was on another man's wrist. She'd given it away. He'd waited too long. And what happened next in that private jet? Destroyed everything he'd built. Is he wearing my watch? The Mafia boss never lost control. Not during wars. Not during betrayals. But when Tanner Ronan stepped onto his jet and saw his assistant with a stranger, the man wearing Tanner's missing platinum heirloom like a wedding ring, every wall shattered. The watch wasn't stolen. It was given. And the woman he'd been too afraid to claim had just chosen someone else. What happened next changed everything. The private hangar was quiet enough for dangerous men, but exclusive enough that no one should question Tanner Ronan walking in early. Still, the moment he crossed from the tarmac into the climate-controlled luxury, the air seemed to shift. 2 security personnel stayed at the jet stairs, while Tanner moved forward with deliberate steps, tailored charcoal suit sharp as a blade, eyes scanning his domain like a man who owned every inch of it. He was not there for pleasure. An urgent deal in Singapore demanded immediate departure. Tanner hated last-minute changes, but he controlled them. What he did not expect was to have every ounce of that control ripped apart in seconds. 5 steps into the cabin, he froze. His heartbeat changed rhythm. His jaw locked. Keaton Ivy. She was there, seated in his private booth near the tinted windows, and she was not alone. Tanner's eyes narrowed without him realizing. Keaton laughed softly at something the man said. A real laugh. Not the polite, measured tone she used in his office. A warm, unguarded laugh he had never heard directed at him. She leaned forward slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The man, tall, clean-cut, wearing a pilot's casual professionalism, smiled and gestured toward the cockpit like they shared an inside joke. Tanner almost stopped breathing. Then he saw it. The platinum watch. Catching the recessed cabin lights, the distinctive bezel, the signature clasp his grandfather had commissioned in Switzerland, the heirloom he hadn't seen in 3 weeks. On this stranger's wrist. Is he wearing my watch? The question detonated from somewhere primal, too loud for the enclosed space, stripping away every layer of executive composure. His assistant, his Keaton, laughing with a man who wore his property, in his jet, in his world. The co-pilot appeared from the cockpit, tablet in hand. Mr. Ronan, you're early. We're still running pre-flight. Stop. Tanner's voice was calm but lethal. Cancel takeoff sequence. The co-pilot blinked. Sir? Tanner didn't repeat himself. His stare was locked on the scene before him, Keaton's smile fading as she finally noticed him, the stranger turning with easy confidence, the watch glinting like a taunt. Cancel. Everything. Hello, friends. If this story touches your heart even a little, go ahead and subscribe, join our family of hope and love, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Let's share this journey together. The cabin pressure felt suffocating despite the climate control running perfectly. Tanner stood between the cockpit entrance and the main seating area, blocking the only exit, his presence filling every inch of available space. Keaton remained standing, her professional mask firmly in place, but he could see the slight tension in her shoulders. Gage Leland sat relaxed, one arm draped over the leather booth, the damned watch catching light with every small movement. Mr. Ronan, Keaton started, her voice steady in that way she used during crisis meetings. If you'll let me explain. Sit down. Tanner didn't raise his voice this time. He didn't need to. The command carried enough weight to make even Gage shift slightly, though the man didn't look particularly intimidated. Keaton lowered herself into the seat across from Gage, spine straight, hands folded in her lap. Tanner moved closer, standing at the end of their booth like a judge at a tribunal. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Then again. He ignored it. Singapore could wait. The entire goddamn world could wait. How long? Tanner's question came out sharper than he intended. How long what? Keaton's eyes met his directly, and that small act of defiance made something dark twist in his chest. How long have you been bringing civilians onto my aircraft without clearance? How long have you been? He stopped himself, jaw working. The real question lodged in his throat, too raw to voice. How long have you been with him? Gage cleared his throat. I'm not a civilian, actually. I wasn't speaking to you. Tanner's gaze didn't leave Keaton's face. In fact, I don't recall giving you permission to speak at all. Tanner. Keaton's tone carried a warning now, the same one she used when he was about to make a business decision based on emotion rather than strategy. Gage is a certified aviation mechanic and backup pilot. He's been contracted through our secondary security protocol for 3 months. You approved the hire. That stopped him. Tanner's mind raced backward through dozens of personnel files, security reports, operational briefings. There had been a recommendation, someone competent to handle mechanical issues on remote flights. He'd signed off without reading details because Keaton had vouched for the candidate. You vouched for him. The words came out like an accusation. I did my job. She held his stare. I hired qualified personnel, which is exactly what you pay me to do. And the watch? Tanner's hand flexed at his side. Is giving away my personal property also part of your job description? Gage shifted forward. She didn't give it to me. I'm repairing. Shut up. Tanner's voice dropped to something dangerous. The next word out of your mouth better be an explanation for why you thought it was acceptable to put on another man's property. It's a watch, Gage said evenly, though his jaw tightened. Not a collar. The cabin went absolutely silent. Even the ambient noise seemed to vanish. Tanner felt something snap inside his chest. A tether he'd been holding onto his entire adult life suddenly severing. He moved before thinking, closing the distance to the booth in 2 strides, one hand slamming down on the table between them hard enough to make the surface vibrate. Take it off. Gage didn't move. With respect, Mr. Ronan. Take it off. Each word came out separately, precisely, laced with barely controlled violence. Tanner, stop. Keaton stood abruptly, positioning herself slightly in front of Gage. The protective gesture sent a spike of something hot and ugly through Tanner's veins. This is absurd. You're acting like what? He stepped closer, forcing her to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Like a man who just found his assistant entertaining strangers in his private space? Like a boss who discovered his employee has been lying about relationships with contracted personnel? I haven't lied about anything. Her voice didn't waver, but he saw color rise in her cheeks. You never asked. I shouldn't have to ask. The admission came out before he could stop it. Too honest, too revealing. You're supposed to... He cut himself off. What was he about to say? You're supposed to be mine? You're supposed to tell me everything? You're supposed to exist only within the parameters of my world? His phone buzzed again. This time, the intercom crackled to life before he could silence it. Boss, your contact is at the gate. Security needs authorization to... Tanner reached up and physically ripped the intercom panel from its mounting, letting it dangle by its wires. The sudden violence of the gesture made Keaton flinch. Gage started to stand, but she put a hand on his shoulder, keeping him seated. Everyone leaves, Tanner said quietly. Flight crew, security, everyone, except you two. That's not... Keaton started. I own this aircraft. I own this hangar. I own the ground you're standing on. He knew he sounded unhinged and didn't care. No one boards. No one leaves. Not until I understand exactly what's happening here. Gage finally removed the watch, setting it deliberately on the table between them. The platinum caught the light, looking simultaneously priceless and meaningless. There. Happy? Tanner stared at the watch, then at the slight tan line on Gage's wrist where it had been resting. How long had he been wearing it? Days? Weeks? The thought of this stranger putting on something that belonged to Tanner every morning, the casual intimacy of that daily ritual, made his vision blur at the edges. Get out. He didn't look at Gage, couldn't risk what he might do if he met the man's eyes. Excuse me? Gage's tone hardened. You heard me. Out. Now. Or I'll have you removed in a way that requires medical attention. Tanner, you can't. Keaton's protest died when he finally looked at her. Whatever she saw in his expression made her take a half step back. I can do anything I want. His voice came out hoarse. This is my world. My rules. And right now, I'm telling you that he leaves, or I make him leave. Your choice. Keaton's hands curled into fists at her sides. This is insane. Then quit. The words exploded from him. Walk off this jet right now. Go with him. Leave. See if I care. But they both knew he was lying. The way his chest heaved with each breath. The way his hands shook before he shoved them into his pockets. The way he couldn't stop staring at her like a drowning man looking at shore. Everything about him screamed the opposite of indifference. Gage stood slowly, carefully, hands visible. Keaton, you don't have to. I'll handle this. She didn't look at him, her eyes still locked on Tanner. Please, just go. I'm not leaving you alone with... Go. Her voice cracked slightly on the word. I'll be fine. Gage hesitated, clearly torn, then picked up the watch and pressed it into Keaton's palm. Call me when you're done here. I'll be in the hangar office. He moved toward the exit, pausing next to Tanner. If you hurt her, professional consequences will be the least of your problems. Tanner said nothing, just waited until he heard the cabin door seal shut, the external stairs retracting. Then it was just the two of them, the watch between Keaton's fingers, and the wreckage of whatever professional boundary they'd been pretending existed. "Sit," he said finally. "I prefer to stand." "That wasn't a request. And I'm not your subordinate in this moment." She held up the watch. "This stopped being about work the second you ripped an intercom off the wall." She was right. The realization settled over him like ice water. This had stopped being about work the moment he'd seen her laughing with another man. Maybe it had never been about work at all. "Explain the watch." He managed to gentle his tone slightly. "Please." Keaton looked down at the platinum in her hand, her thumb running over the engraved case back. "Your birthday is in 3 weeks." His breath caught. "I was having it repaired. The clasp was damaged. You'd stopped wearing it. I thought—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "I thought you'd want it fixed. Gage specializes in vintage mechanisms. He was doing me a favor." The humiliation hit him like a physical blow. All of this, the rage, the accusations, the territorial display over a birthday present, over her trying to do something thoughtful, something personal. "Keaton." "No." She cut him off, and now he heard real anger in her voice. "You don't get to apologize yet, not after what you just did." "I was jealous." The word hung between them. "You were jealous of someone repairing a watch, of someone making me laugh, of the possibility that I might have a life outside of managing yours." He couldn't deny it. The truth of her words stripped away every defense he might have mounted. "You have no right." She took a step toward him, and he instinctively backed up. "No right to my time outside work. No right to approval of my relationships. No right to act like you're mine." The confession tore out of him. "Is that what you were going to say?" She stopped, eyes widening slightly. "Because that's what I was feeling, Keaton. Every second I watched you with him. Every time you smiled. Every moment that watch caught the light, I felt like someone was taking something that belonged to me. Something I never admitted I wanted until I saw someone else about to claim it." The cabin filled with heavy silence. Outside, he could hear his security team trying to figure out what to do with his very angry business contact. None of it mattered. "I don't belong to anyone," Keaton said quietly. "Not professionally, not personally. That's not how this works." "I know." He did know. Intellectually, he understood everything she was saying, but the primitive part of his brain, the part that operated on instinct and possession and territorial fury, didn't care about logic. "But that doesn't change what I feel." She studied him for a long moment. This woman who'd seen him at his worst and best, who managed his chaos and anticipated his needs, who somehow made his impossible life function. "And what exactly do you feel, Tanner?" The question hung there, demanding honesty he wasn't sure he could give. But after everything he'd just put her through, she deserved the truth. "Terrified," he admitted. "I feel terrified that you'll realize there's a world outside this one, outside me. And you'll choose it." The Singapore deal collapsed while they sat in silence. Tanner's phone eventually died from the constant calls he ignored. The hangar staff gave up trying to reach him after an hour. The business world that usually commanded his absolute attention faded to irrelevance compared to the woman sitting across from him, the platinum watch now resting on the table between them like a confession neither of them wanted to voice. Keaton hadn't moved from her seat since his admission. She'd simply looked at him with those sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing, seeing past every carefully constructed wall he'd spent years building. The vulnerability of it made his skin crawl, made him want to take back every word, but he'd gone too far for retreat now. "You're right," she said finally. Her voice was different, softer, but no less certain. "You were terrified." Past tense. He frowned. "What?" "We're terrified. As in, you don't get to stay in that fear." She picked up the watch, turning it over in her hands. "Because that terror, that jealousy, it hurt me, Tanner. It humiliated Gage, who was doing me a favor. And it torpedoed whatever business you flew here to conduct." Shame, unfamiliar and sharp, cut through him. "I know. Do you?" She leaned forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, you just detonated your professional life over a misunderstanding, over the idea of me with someone else. And I need to know, is this going to happen every time I speak to a man? Every time I have a life outside your line of sight?" The question landed like a punch. Was he that person? The kind of man who'd suffocate someone with possession disguised as protection? He'd watched his father do exactly that to his mother, watched the slow erosion of her independence until she became nothing but an extension of his needs. He'd sworn he'd never become that kind of man. "No," he said, forcing himself to meet her eyes. "Or at least I don't want to be. Wanting isn't enough." She set the watch down with a decisive click. "I need guarantees." "Guarantees?" The word came out harsher than intended. "You want a contract? Terms and conditions for whatever this is?" "I want respect." Her tone hardened. "I want autonomy. I want the understanding that if this," she gestured between them, "becomes something, it's because we both choose it, not because you've claimed me like territory." Everything she said made sense. Perfect, logical sense. But the part of him that had spent the last 2 hours spiraling into possessive fury wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she didn't understand the danger she represented, not to him, but to his carefully ordered existence. She was the crack in his armor, and he'd just shown her exactly where it was. "I don't know if I can promise that." The honesty cost him, but lying would cost more. "I don't know if I'm capable of being rational when it comes to you." Something shifted in her expression. Not softening exactly, but a kind of acknowledgement. "At least you're honest." "It's all I have left after that display." He managed a bitter smile. "Well, that and a very expensive watch that apparently needs repair." She huffed a sound that might have been a laugh if the tension wasn't still so thick. "The clasp is actually fine," I lied to Gage. His heart stuttered. "What?" "I wanted it engraved." She turned the watch over, showing him the smooth back panel. "Your grandfather's initials are here, and your father's. I thought," she stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "I thought maybe you'd want yours added, to complete the legacy." The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful, so personal, that it momentarily robbed him of speech. She'd noticed something he'd never mentioned, understood significance he'd never explained, and taken steps to honor a family tradition she had no obligation to care about. "Why?" The question came out hoarse. "Because you never wear it anymore. Because I've seen you touch your wrist sometimes, like you're reaching for something that's not there. Because," she hesitated, then pushed forward, "because I know what it meant to you, even if you never said it out loud." That was Keaton. Always 3 steps ahead, reading the unsaid, managing the chaos of his life with a precision that should have been impossible. And he'd repaid her thoughtfulness with accusations and territorial displays. "I'm sorry." The apology felt inadequate, but he forced himself to continue. "I'm sorry for how I behaved, for the assumptions I made, for treating you like a possession," she finished. "You can say it." "Yes." He swallowed hard. "Like a possession. You deserved better than that. You deserve better than," he gestured to himself, encompassing the man who'd just proven he could be irrational, jealous, and cruel when threatened. "This." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she did something he didn't expect. She laughed. Not a bitter sound, but something genuine, if a bit incredulous. "You're an idiot," she said, shaking her head. "A brilliant, terrifying, completely unhinged idiot." He blinked. "I'm not sure if I should be offended or—" "I was having your watch engraved because I've been in love with you for 6 months." The confession came out matter-of-fact, like she was reporting quarterly earnings. "Possibly longer, if I'm being honest. And watching you lose your mind over Gage would have been funny if it wasn't so frustrating." The cabin seemed to tilt. "You're what?" "In love with you. Try to keep up." She stood, moving around the table to face him directly. "But here's what you need to understand, Tanner. I won't be loved like an asset. I won't be managed like a crisis. And I absolutely will not tolerate you treating other people like threats just because you're afraid to admit what you feel. Hey, if this story touches your heart even a little, go ahead and subscribe, join our family of hope and love, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Let's share this journey together." His mind raced, trying to process the rapid shift in reality. She loved him. Keaton, brilliant, unflappable. Keaton loved him. The knowledge should have felt like victory. But her conditions hung in the air like a test he wasn't sure he could pass. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to care about someone without trying to control the outcome." "Then you learn." She reached out, her hand hovering near his chest. "Or you let me go find someone who already knows how." The implied threat of losing her, now that he knew what he could have, sent panic clawing up his throat. "That's not fair. Life isn't fair." Her hand dropped. "But I am giving you a choice. Figure out how to love me without caging me, or accept that we stay professional. Those are your options. And if I choose wrong?" He had to know. "If I try and fail, then we'll deal with it." She picked up the watch, pressing it into his palm. But you don't get to not try. Not after what you just confessed. Not after I confessed. We're past pretending now. The weight of the platinum felt different in his hand. Not like a possession, but like a responsibility. Like something that required care and attention and respect to maintain its value. He looked from the watch to Keaton's face, seeing the parallel she was drawing without having to say it out loud. I'll try. The words felt insufficient, but they were all he had. I can't promise I'll be good at it. I can't promise I won't relapse into, he gestured vaguely, whatever that was. But I'll try. She nodded slowly. That's a start. What about Gage? He hated the question. Hated the jealousy still simmering under the surface. Do I need to? Gage is a colleague. A friend. She held his gaze. And you're going to apologize to him. Sincerely. Because that's what adults do when they behave badly. The idea of apologizing to the man he'd just forcibly removed from his jet made every instinct rebel. But Keaton's expression was implacable. This was the price of entry. Respect for her autonomy meant respecting her friendships, even when it killed him. Fine. The word came out grudging. I'll apologize. Good. She moved toward the exit, then paused. And Tanner? The next time you feel that territorial fury building, you talk to me about it. You don't explode. You don't threaten people. You use your words like a functional adult. Understood? He nodded, not trusting his voice. Also, she glanced back over her shoulder, and now there was something different in her expression. Something almost playful. For what it's worth, the jealousy was a little attractive. In a completely unhinged, probably should be concerning kind of way. Before he could respond, she opened the cabin door, letting in the sound of the hangar and the reality of the mess he'd created. His security team stood in various states of confusion. His business contact had apparently left in fury, and Gage was leaning against the hangar wall with his arms crossed, looking like he very much wanted to punch Tanner in the face. Keaton descended the stairs, her professional mask sliding back into place as she addressed his head of security. Mr. Ronan will need the jet prepared for immediate departure to Singapore. Personal emergency resolved. He'll be ready to leave in 30 minutes. Then she walked directly to Gage, said something too quiet for Tanner to hear, and the man's rigid posture relaxed incrementally. They spoke for a few moments, Gage's eyes flicking up to the jet where Tanner still stood in the doorway, visible to everyone. Finally, Gage nodded, said something that made Keaton smile, that same warm smile Tanner had seen earlier, and headed toward the exit. Keaton turned back to face the jet, her expression unreadable across the distance. Then she pulled out her phone, and a moment later, Tanner's dead phone vibrated with a notification. He'd been so focused on her that he hadn't noticed his security team had brought him a replacement. The message was simple. 30 minutes. Don't waste them. He looked at the watch still in his hand, then at the woman who'd somehow managed to destroy and rebuild his entire worldview in the span of a few hours. She was already moving away, already managing the crisis he'd created, already proving that she was more than capable of handling his chaos. The realization settled over him with uncomfortable clarity. He needed her far more than she needed him. And if he wanted any chance of keeping her, he'd have to become the kind of man who deserved her, not by force, not by possession, but by choice. His security chief approached cautiously. Sir, about the Singapore contact. Reschedule. Tanner descended the stairs, already pulling up his phone contacts. And get me a jeweler. Someone discreet who can do custom engraving. Tonight. Sir. Just do it. He started toward his car, then paused. And find out what Gage Leland's rate is for contract work. I want to double it. The security chief looked baffled. The pilot you just... I know what I did. Tanner's jaw tightened. That's why I'm fixing it. Now move. 28 minutes later, he stood outside the hangar office where Gage had retreated. The door was open, and the man looked up from his phone with an expression that suggested he was debating whether answering questions from police would be worth the satisfaction of punching his employer. I was out of line. Tanner forced the words out before his pride could stop them. What I said, how I acted, there's no excuse for it. Gage studied him for a long moment. No, there isn't. I'm the apology stuck in his throat. Years of never backing down, making it physically difficult. I'm sorry. For the threats. For the accusations. For treating you like a security risk when you were doing Keaton a favor. Are you sorry for the jealousy? Gage's tone was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. Or just sorry you got caught acting on it? The distinction mattered, Tanner realized. One was about appearances. The other was about actual growth. Both, he admitted. The jealousy isn't going anywhere, but how I handle it that needs to change. Gage nodded slowly. She deserves better than watching you self-destruct every time she talks to someone. I know. The agreement came easier this time. I'm working on it. Work faster. Gage stood, and despite being slightly shorter than Tanner, somehow managed to look down at him. Because if you hurt her professionally, personally, any way at all, you'll discover that contract work pays well enough to make the legal consequences of breaking your jaw worth it. Tanner felt his lips twitch despite himself. Noted. Good. Gage moved past him toward the exit, then paused. For what it's worth, she talks about you constantly, what you need, what you're working on, how to make your life easier. It's exhausting to watch, honestly. So if you're planning to pursue this, at least make sure you're worth the effort she's already put in. The observation hit harder than any threat could have. Gage left before Tanner could formulate a response, leaving him alone with the uncomfortable truth. Keaton had been taking care of him, emotionally and professionally, for far longer than he'd realized, and he'd been too focused on control to notice. His phone buzzed. Another message from Keaton. Time's up. Jet is ready. He looked down at the watch still in his hand. The engraving could wait. First, he had a business relationship to salvage in Singapore. But when he returned, things would be different. He'd make sure of it. The question was whether different would be enough. Singapore air was thick with humidity and the smell of jet fuel. Tanner stepped off the plane into a wall of heat that immediately made his suit feel suffocating. Keaton followed 3 steps behind, her tablet already out, her professional mask firmly in place. They'd barely spoken during the flight. She'd worked through contracts while he'd pretended to review financial reports but mostly just watched her out of his peripheral vision. The business contact he'd abandoned was, predictably, livid. It took 3 meetings, 2 dinners, and a substantial increase in investment terms to salvage the deal. Keaton sat beside him through all of it, her presence a steadying force, her inputs precisely timed and devastatingly effective. She was brilliant. He'd always known that intellectually, but watching her operate now, after everything that had happened, made him aware of exactly how much of his success rested on her shoulders. On the second night, after the final contract was signed, his contact made an observation that landed like a blade. You're lucky to have her. Most assistants would have quit after a display like that. Tanner's hand tightened around his whiskey glass. She's not most assistants. Clearly. The man's eyes tracked to where Keaton was speaking with the contract lawyers. Her posture relaxed, but commanding respect from men twice her age. My question is whether you're smart enough to realize what you have before someone else does. The territorial fury tried to resurface, but Tanner forced it down. This was exactly what Keaton had warned him about. The need to control, to possess, to eliminate any perceived threat. He took a slow breath, then another, waiting for the spike of panic to recede. I'm working on it, he said finally. His contact laughed. Work faster. Women like that don't wait around for men to figure out their feelings. The same advice Gage had given him. Apparently, his inability to handle his emotions was obvious to everyone except him. Tanner drained his whiskey and stood. Excuse me. He crossed the hotel bar to where Keaton was finishing her conversation, waiting until the lawyers departed before speaking. We need to talk. She glanced at her watch, not his platinum heirloom, but her own practical timepiece. It's nearly midnight. Can this wait until... No. He softened his tone at her raised eyebrow. Please, just give me 10 minutes. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. The garden terrace. It's more private. They made their way through the hotel's opulent hallways to an outdoor space overlooking the city skyline. Singapore glittered below them, 1,000 points of light reflecting off the harbor. The air was still humid but moving, carrying the scent of tropical flowers and distant rain. Keaton leaned against the railing, not looking at him. If this is about the deal terms, it's not. He moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain space between them. It's about the watch. She went still. Tanner, we already discussed. I'm not giving it to you. That made her turn, confusion clear on her face. What? The watch. I'm not giving it to you. He pulled it from his pocket, the platinum warm from being close to his body. Because it's already yours. I don't understand. You were having it engraved with my grandfather's initials, my father's, mine, creating a legacy piece. He turned it over in his hands. But the legacy isn't complete until it has your initials too. Her breath caught. Tanner, I'm not proposing. He needed to be clear about that. even as the words felt inadequate. I'm not trying to claim you or possess you or any of the things I've been accused of. I'm just... He struggled for the right words. I'm trying to show you that you're not outside my world. You're the center of it, and I want proof of that. Something permanent. She was quiet for so long he thought he'd miscalculated entirely. Then she reached out, her fingers brushing over the watch's surface. Adding my initials to your family heirloom isn't claiming me, it's acknowledging reality. He met her eyes. You're already part of my life in every way that matters. The only thing missing is us being honest about what that means. And what does it mean? Her voice was soft but demanding. Spell it out, Tanner. No metaphors, no possessive declarations, just the truth. He took a breath, steadying himself. It means, I want you, not as an assistant, not as someone to manage my chaos. As a partner, someone who challenges me, someone who tells me when I'm being an unhinged idiot, someone who sees past all the control and fear to whatever's underneath. And when the jealousy comes back? She held his gaze. When some man talks to me and you feel that territorial fury, I'll tell you about it. The admission cost him, but he forced it out. I'll say, Keaton, I'm feeling possessive and irrational, and I need you to remind me that I don't own you. And you'll roll your eyes and remind me that I'm an idiot, and we'll handle it together. A smile tugged at her lips. That's your plan? Confess your toxic masculinity in real time? It's a work in progress. He allowed himself a small smile in return, but it's better than ripping intercom panels off walls. She laughed then, a real laugh that eased some of the tension in his chest. The bar is literally on the floor, and yet somehow you're stepping over it. Is that a yes? He needed to hear it clearly. It's a maybe. She took the watch from his hands, examining it in the ambient light. On the condition that we do this right. No secret relationship that compromises my professional standing. No using your position to pressure me. And absolutely no explosions of jealous fury without communication first. Agreed. He'd agree to anything at this point. What else? I want my own projects. Her tone turned more serious. I've been managing your world for 2 years. I want something that's mine. Investments I choose. Deals I negotiate. Decisions that aren't filtered through what you need. The request surprised him, but it shouldn't have. Of course she wanted autonomy. Of course she wanted proof that this wasn't just about him absorbing her life into his. Done. He pulled out his phone, already mentally calculating assets he could transfer. How much capital do you need? I don't want your money. She put a hand over his phone, stopping him. I want your support, your contacts, your respect when I make decisions you might not agree with. I want partnership, not patronage. The distinction mattered. He was being tested again, he realized. Being asked to prove that he understood the difference between providing for someone and controlling them. You'll have it. He pocketed his phone. All of it. She studied him for a long moment, then lifted the watch. If I agree to this to us, I need one more thing. Name it. Trust. The word hung between them. Real trust. Not the performative kind where you say you trust me but actually monitor my every move. Not the kind where you trust me until the moment I do something that scares you. Actual, foundational trust that I'm capable of making my own choices and living with the consequences. It was the hardest thing she could have asked for. Trust meant relinquishing control. It meant accepting that she might choose wrong, might get hurt, might encounter risks he couldn't eliminate. Every instinct he possessed screamed against it. But the alternative was losing her entirely. I'll try. It was all he could promise. I'll fail sometimes. I'll probably relapse into trying to protect you from every possible threat. She considered this, turning the watch over in her hands. That's honest at least. It's all I have. Then I suppose it'll have to be enough. She handed the watch back to him. Get it engraved. All 4 sets of initials. Make it official. Relief and terror warred in his chest. Is that a yes? It's a provisional yes pending you, not completely losing your mind again. She moved closer, and for the first time since the jet, there was no professional distance between them. But yes, Tanner, we can try this, whatever this is. He wanted to kiss her. The urge was overwhelming, made stronger by the soft light and the privacy, and the fact that she'd just agreed to something he'd been too afraid to name. But he held back, waiting for her signal, letting her control the pace. Keaton seemed to read his restraint, and something shifted in her expression. You're learning, slowly, better than not at all. She reached up, her hand resting against his chest where his heart was hammering. Just so we're clear, I'm doing this because I want to, Not because you maneuvered me into it. Not because I feel obligated. Because I genuinely want to see what we could be if you stop trying to control the outcome. Understood. His hand came up to cover hers, and the simple contact sent electricity through his nervous system. Good. She closed the remaining distance and kissed him. It wasn't the desperate, possessive kiss he might have expected after days of tension. It was deliberate, testing, a question and an answer at the same time. Her lips were soft against his, and she tasted like the wine from dinner and something uniquely her. He let her control the kiss, following her lead, forcing himself not to deepen it or demand more. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. See? You can be taught. He huffed a laugh against her mouth. Don't get used to it. I'm still an unhinged idiot, remember? Oh, I'm aware. But she was smiling. Lucky for you, I have a thing for brilliant, terrifying, completely irrational men who explode over jewelry. That's a very specific type. You'd be surprised. She stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. Now, we have an early flight tomorrow. I suggest we both get some sleep before you do something else that requires damage control. He wanted to argue, wanted to pull her back and spend the rest of the night figuring out exactly what they were to each other. But she was right. They had time now. The panic of losing her had receded, replaced by the steadier knowledge that she'd chosen him, provisionally, with conditions, but still chosen. Keaton? He caught her hand before she could leave. Yes? Thank you. The words felt inadequate. For putting up with me. For seeing past the chaos to whatever's underneath. He struggled. For giving me a chance to be better. Her expression softened. You're welcome. Now go to bed before you ruin the moment with another territorial declaration. He let her go, watching as she disappeared back into the hotel. Only when she was gone did he look down at the watch in his hand, imagining 4 sets of initials engraved into the platinum. A legacy no longer about possession, but about partnership. It was a start. The report arrived while Tanner was reviewing acquisition targets in his Singapore hotel suite. His head of security delivered it personally, a tablet containing Gage Leland's complete background check. Every school, every job, every relationship, every financial transaction for the past 10 years. Tanner had ordered the investigation the moment they'd left the hangar, an automatic reflex to catalog and assess any potential threat. Now, looking at the tablet, he felt a twist of something uncomfortable. This was exactly the kind of thing Keaton had warned him about. The need to investigate, to verify, to eliminate uncertainty through information and control. He'd promised to trust her. This investigation was the opposite of trust, but the tablet sat there, and his curiosity burned. Just a glance, just enough to confirm that Gage was exactly who he claimed to be. Where was the harm in that? Trust. Keaton's voice echoed in his memory. Real trust. Not the kind where you trust me until the moment I do something that scares you. Tanner set the tablet face down on his desk without opening the report. Delete it. His security chief blinked. Sir? Delete the report. All of it. I don't want to know, but you ordered. I was wrong. The admission came easier this time. Gage Leland is contracted personnel who's been properly vetted. What I do or don't know about his personal life is irrelevant. With respect, sir, you don't usually take that approach with people who have access to. I'm aware of what I usually do. Tanner's tone hardened. I'm telling you what I'm doing now. Delete the report, permanently, and inform the team that no further investigation into Leland is authorized without my explicit approval. The security chief looked like he wanted to argue, but years of working for Tanner had taught him to recognize when the boss was immovable. Understood. I'll handle it immediately. After he left, Tanner sat in the silence of his suite, staring at the spot where the tablet had been. The urge to call his security chief back, to just take a quick look, was nearly overwhelming. What if Gage had a criminal record? What if his financial situation suggested ulterior motives? What if there was something in his past that made him unsuitable to be around Keaton? But that was the point, wasn't it? Trust meant accepting uncertainty. It meant believing that Keaton's judgment was sound, that her choice of friends and colleagues was her own to make, and that not every variable needed to be controlled. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. His phone buzzed. A message from Keaton. Still awake? He typed back. Can't sleep. You? Reviewing contracts. Question about the Singapore terms. They spent the next 20 minutes exchanging messages about deal structures and liability clauses. the conversation flowing with the easy rhythm of two people who'd worked together long enough to finish each other's thoughts. Somewhere in the middle of debating escrow arrangements, she sent, "You're different tonight." "Different how?" "Calmer. Less like you're about to buy Singapore just to maintain control over your immediate environment." He smiled despite himself. I deleted Gage's background check without reading it. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. "You had him investigated?" Tanner grimaced. This was the part where he explained himself. "I ordered it before we talked in the garden. My security chief delivered it an hour ago. I didn't open it." Another long pause. "Why not?" "Because you were right. I don't need to verify every person in your life. I need to trust your judgment, so I'm trying." The pause stretched even longer this time. Then, "Thank you. That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't." "It isn't." He hesitated, then added, "I kept wanting to open it. Convince myself I was just being thorough. Professional due diligence. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." "Growth looks good on you, Mr. Ronan." The formal title made him laugh. "Are we back to Mr. Ronan now? In text messages sent over hotel Wi-Fi?" "Absolutely. Someone could be monitoring these." "You're paranoid. I work for a man who just had my friend investigated. Paranoia is justified." "Fair point." He shifted the conversation back to business, but the easy banter continued until nearly 2 a.m. When they finally said goodnight, Tanner felt something unfamiliar. Contentment, not the satisfaction of a deal closed or a threat eliminated, but the simple pleasure of existing in Keaton's orbit without trying to control it. Maybe this was what growth felt like. Uncomfortable, uncertain, but somehow lighter than the alternative. The next day passed in a blur of meetings and negotiations. Keaton remained professionally distant in public, but there were small moments, a shared glance during a particularly tedious presentation, her hand brushing his as she passed him documents, the slight smile when their contact made a comment about their excellent partnership that reminded him they'd crossed a threshold. By the time they boarded the jet for the return flight, Tanner felt like he'd lived 3 weeks in 3 days. He collapsed into his usual seat, while Keaton spoke with the flight crew. Going through her standard pre-flight routine, she'd changed into comfortable clothes for the long flight home, and seeing her in jeans and a soft sweater instead of her usual professional attire did something to his chest. She caught him staring. "What?" "Nothing." He looked away. "Just, you look different. Different bad or different good. Different real." He met her eyes again. "Like I'm seeing you instead of the professional mask you wear." She settled into the seat across from him, her expression thoughtful. "You've seen me without the mask before. You just weren't paying attention. I'm paying attention now. I've noticed." She pulled out her tablet, but her tone was warm. "Try not to be too obvious about it. The crew is going to start talking. Let them talk." The possessive declaration slipped out before he could stop it, and he immediately tensed, waiting for her reprimand. But Keaton just smiled. "Baby steps, Tanner. We're working on the territorial declarations, remember?" "Right. Baby steps." He forced himself to relax. "How about this instead? I'm glad we're doing this. Whatever this is. Better." She returned to her tablet. Much better. They worked in comfortable silence for the first hour of the flight. Then Tanner's phone pinged with an email that made his jaw tighten. His Singapore contact had CC'd him on a message to several other potential investors, praising Keaton's negotiation skills and suggesting they steal her away if they ever got the chance. The territorial fury sparked immediately. His first instinct was to reply all with a thinly veiled threat disguised as professional courtesy. His second was to have his legal team draft non-compete clauses that would make it nearly impossible for Keaton to work for anyone else. His third was to simply buy out any company that tried to recruit her. Instead, he set his phone down and took a breath. "Keaton?" She looked up. "Yes?" "I'm feeling possessive and irrational, and I need you to remind me that I don't own you." Her eyebrows rose, surprise clear on her face. Then she laughed, a bright sound that filled the cabin. "You actually did it. You're communicating like a functional adult. Don't sound so shocked. You're the one who suggested it." "I know, but I didn't expect you to actually—" She stopped, her expression softening. "What triggered it?" He handed her his phone, letting her read the email. Her lips pursed as she scrolled through the message thread. "Ah, the professional poaching attempt. They're not subtle about it." "No, they're not." She handed the phone back. And you're handling it by talking to me instead of buying their companies or having them audited for tax fraud. Is that what I would have done? That's exactly what you would have done. She leaned forward. So what do you need from me right now? Reassurance? Perspective? Permission to send a mildly threatening reply? The fact that she understood him well enough to offer options made something in his chest ease. Reassurance, I think, that you're not going to jump ship the moment someone offers you more money or a better title. I'm not going to jump ship. Her tone was steady, certain. Not for money, not for a title. The only thing that would make me leave is if you go back to treating me like a possession instead of a partner. Noted. He felt the tension drain from his shoulders. Thank you. You're welcome. She returned to her tablet. And Tanner? I'm proud of you. That couldn't have been easy. It hadn't been. Every instinct still screamed at him to eliminate the threat, to ensure no one else could even consider taking her away. But the alternative, losing her trust by trying to control her, was worse. One day at a time, he muttered. One day at a time, she agreed. The rest of the flight passed peacefully. They worked, ate dinner together while discussing non-business topics. And at some point, Tanner dozed off with his head tilted back against the seat. He woke to find Keaton had draped a blanket over him and dimmed the cabin lights. She was still awake, working by the soft glow of her tablet, and when she noticed he was awake, she smiled. Feel better? Yeah, he did. How much longer? 2 hours. Go back to sleep if you want. But he didn't want to sleep. He wanted to watch her work, to exist in this quiet space where they were just two people flying through the dark. No drama or jealousy or possessive fury. Just, to them. Keaton? When we land, I need to do something. For Gage. She looked up, curiosity in her eyes. What kind of something? An apology. A real one. Not just words. He'd been thinking about it since Singapore. I humiliated him, threatened him, treated him like he was less than human. That requires more than just saying, I'm sorry. What did you have in mind? I'm not sure yet. He ran a hand through his hair. What do you think would mean something to him? The fact that he was asking instead of deciding unilaterally made her smile widen. I think sitting down with him, admitting you were wrong, and asking what you can do to make it right would be a good start. That's terrifying. Welcome to being a decent human being. It's uncomfortable. He laughed despite himself. Any other wisdom you'd like to share? Just one thing. She set her tablet aside, giving him her full attention. You're doing better than you think. The fact that you recognize when you're being irrational, that you're willing to apologize, that you're trying to change, that's more than most people manage. So don't be so hard on yourself. The unexpected praise made his throat tight. I nearly ruined everything. But you didn't. And you're actively working to make sure it doesn't happen again. She reached across the small space between their seats, her hand finding his. That's what matters. Not perfection. Just consistent effort. He laced his fingers through hers, marveling at how natural the gesture felt. What if I relapse? What if the next time someone talks to you, or looks at you? No. Then we'll handle it. She squeezed his hand. Together. That's what partnership means. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep trying. They sat like that for a long moment, hands linked, the cabin quiet around them. Outside the windows, darkness stretched in all directions, punctuated by distant stars. Inside, Tanner felt something shift and settle, like a bone that had been dislocated finally clicking back into place. Maybe he could do this. Maybe he could be the kind of man who loved without suffocating, who protected without possessing, who cared without controlling. It wouldn't be easy. He'd fail sometimes. But with Keaton beside him, calling him on his bullshit and believing in his capacity for growth, maybe it was possible. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not giving up on me. For seeing past the unhinged territorial displays to whatever's underneath. He struggled for the right words. For making me want to be better. She smiled, soft and genuine. You're welcome. Now get some rest. We land in 2 hours, and you have an apology to plan. He closed his eyes, her hand still warm in his, and for the first time in days, his mind was quiet. No strategies, no contingencies, no desperate attempts to control outcomes he couldn't predict. Just peace. Gage was working in one of the private hangar maintenance bays when they arrived. Tanner had asked Keaton where to find him, then insisted on going alone. This was his mess to clean up, and having her there would feel like using her as a shield. He found the man bent over an engine component, tools spread across a work surface, completely focused on his task. For a moment, Tanner just watched, noting the precise movements, the competent way Gage handled complex machinery. He was good at his job, probably better than the previous contractor they'd used. "I can feel you lurking," Gage said without looking up. "Either come in or leave." "The hovering is creepy." Tanner stepped fully into the bay, hands in his pockets to keep from doing something stupid with them. "I owe you an apology." "You owe me several." Gage set down his tools, finally turning to face him. "But I'll take what I can get. I was completely out of line. Everything I said, everything I did, there's no excuse for it." Tanner forced himself to maintain eye contact. "You were doing Keaton a favor, and I treated you like a threat. That was wrong." Gage crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "Go on." "I let jealousy override basic human decency. I made assumptions about your relationship with Keaton, about your intentions, about your character. I threatened you. I humiliated you in front of staff. And I did it all because I was too much of a coward to admit what I was actually feeling, which was terrified." The admission came easier now. Terrified that she had a life outside of my orbit. Terrified that someone like you, someone stable and kind and not dragging around a metric ton of baggage, would offer her something I couldn't. Gage studied him for a long moment. "And now?" "Now I'm trying to be better. Trying to be the kind of man who deserves her." Tanner pulled out his phone, pulling up a banking app, "which includes making amends for my behavior. I'm doubling your contract rate, retroactive to your start date, and I'm approving a performance bonus that—" "Stop." Gage held up a hand. "I don't want your money." Tanner blinked. "I'm trying to— I know what you're trying to do. Buy your way out of guilt." Gage's tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "But that's not how this works. You don't get to throw money at me and call it even. Then what do you want?" Tanner fought to keep frustration out of his voice. "Tell me how to fix this." "You can't fix it, not completely." Gage moved back to his work surface, beginning to reassemble the engine component. "What you did, how you acted, that revealed something about who you are. Money doesn't change that." The words hit like a physical blow. "So you want me to what? Resign myself to being unforgiven? I want you to actually change." Gage didn't look up from his work. "Not just promise to change, not just throw resources at the problem. Actually do the hard work of becoming someone different." "I'm trying. Are you—" Now Gage did look up, his gaze sharp. "Or are you just trying hard enough to keep Keaton happy, because the moment she's not watching, the moment you feel threatened again, what's to stop you from reverting to type?" The question hung in the air, demanding an honest answer. Tanner could lie, could claim noble motivation and genuine growth, but Gage would see through it. And worse, Tanner would know it was bullshit. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I want to believe I'd handle it better, that I've learned something. But until it happens again, I can't be sure." Something shifted in Gage's expression. "Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. At least you're honest about it." "It's all I have." Tanner moved closer, careful not to invade the man's space. "Look, I know I can't undo what happened. I know an apology and money don't make it okay, but I need you to understand something. Keaton, she matters. More than the business. More than my pride. More than my need to control everything in my orbit. And part of what makes her matter is the people in her life. People like you." Gage set down his tools again, giving Tanner his full attention. "Where are you going with this?" "I'm asking for a second chance. Not for forgiveness. Not even for friendship. Just for the opportunity to prove that what you saw on that jet isn't all I am." Tanner swallowed his pride. "And I'm asking you not to pull away from Keaton because of my behavior. She needs people in her life who aren't part of my world. People who remind her there's more to existence than managing my chaos." For the first time since they'd met, Gage's hard expression softened slightly. "You really care about her." "I do. More than I know how to express." Tanner managed a bitter smile, which is probably obvious, given the completely unhinged explosion over a watch. Gage huffed what might have been a laugh. "That was quite a display. I'm not proud of it." "You shouldn't be," but there was less edge in Gage's tone now. "Look, I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was genuinely fucked up, and I don't owe you absolution just because you feel bad about it. I understand." But Gage held up a hand to stop Tanner's interruption. "Keaton clearly sees something in you, something worth the effort she's putting in, and I respect her judgment, so I'm not going anywhere. I'll keep being her friend, keep being available when she needs someone outside your world. But you need to understand that if you ever pull something like that again, money and apologies won't matter. I'll make sure she sees exactly who you are." The threat was clear and entirely fair. Tanner nodded slowly. "Understood. Good." Gage returned to his work, effectively dismissing him. "Now get out of my hangar. I have actual work to do." Tanner turned to leave, then paused at the entrance. "For what it's worth, thank you. For fixing the watch. For being patient with Keaton's request. For not pressing charges for assault when you absolutely could have." "I didn't do it for you," Gage said without looking up. "I did it for her. Remember that." "I will." The walk back to his car felt longer than it should have. Tanner's pride stung from the encounter. From having his apology essentially rejected. From being told money couldn't solve his problems. But underneath the sting was something else. Respect. Gage had every right to hold him accountable. To refuse easy forgiveness. To demand actual change instead of just performative gestures. And maybe that's what Tanner needed. Not people who would accept his apologies and move on, but people who would hold his feet to the fire, who would make him prove his growth through actions instead of words. His phone buzzed. "Keaton, how did it go?" He typed back. "About as well as I deserved. He doesn't forgive me." "That's fair. I know. Doesn't make it feel better. Growth isn't supposed to feel good. It's supposed to feel like you're being reconstructed from the inside out. Uncomfortable but necessary." He smiled despite himself. "When did you become so wise?" "I've always been this wise. You're just finally paying attention." "Fair point." He climbed into his car, starting the engine but not immediately driving away. Instead, he pulled the platinum watch from his pocket, studying it in the afternoon light. The surface was still smooth, unmarked. But soon it would carry 4 sets of initials, a family legacy expanded to include someone who'd chosen to stay despite every reason to leave. He pulled up his jeweler's contact and typed out a message. "Ready to proceed with the engraving. All 4 names. I'll send the exact specifications tonight." Then he put the car in gear and drove toward home, toward whatever came next, toward the terrifying and exhilarating prospect of becoming someone different, one day at a time. 3 days later, Tanner found himself in an unfamiliar position, asking permission. He stood outside Keaton's apartment, a space he'd never visited, despite 2 years of her managing every aspect of his life, holding a small leather box and rehearsing what he wanted to say. She answered on the second knock, dressed casually in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. The domesticity of it did something to his chest. "Tanner," surprise colored her voice. "I thought we agreed to keep personal and professional separate for a while. Give people time to adjust." "We did. This is," he held up the box. "I wanted you to see this before we're back in the office, before there's an audience." She studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." Her apartment was smaller than he expected, but immaculately organized. Books lined one wall, a comfortable couch faced a modest TV, and the kitchen was spotless but clearly used. This was Keaton's space, unmarked by his influence or control, and seeing it made him acutely aware of how much of her life existed outside his orbit. "Nice place," he said, meaning it. "It's home." She moved to the kitchen, pulling down 2 mugs. "Tea?" "Sure." He set the leather box on her coffee table, then lowered himself to the couch. "I'm not staying long. I just wanted to show me the watch." She handed him a mug of tea, then settled beside him, careful to maintain space between them. "That's what's in the box, right? The engraving is done." "Yes." He set his mug aside, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been even during billion-dollar negotiations. "But before I show you, I need to explain something." She waited, her attention focused entirely on him. "I've been thinking about legacy, about what it means to carry on family traditions, to honor the people who came before while also acknowledging that things change, that we change." He picked up the box, turning it over in his hands. "My grandfather started our family's empire, built it from nothing, used methods that weren't always legal or ethical, but established something that lasted. My father expanded it, legitimized parts of it, made us respectable, and he paused, forcing himself to be honest. "I've been maintaining what they built, protecting it, controlling it, making sure nothing threatens the legacy. Until now," Keaton said softly. "Until now." He met her eyes. "You made me realize that a legacy built on control and fear isn't worth protecting. That real power comes from partnership, from trust, from letting people choose to stay rather than forcing them." He opened the box, revealing the platinum watch. The metal gleamed in the afternoon light, and the engraving on the case back was clearly visible. 4 sets of initials, each in a slightly different style of script, creating a visual timeline of the family's history. T. R. His grandfather's initials, bold and unapologetic. M. R. His father's slightly more refined but still strong. T. R. His own, matching his grandfather's style but with subtle differences. And finally, in a script that managed to be both elegant and strong, K. I. Keaton reached out, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced over her initials. Tanner, you're part of this legacy now, not because I'm claiming you, not because I need to mark you as mine, but because you've chosen to be part of it. You've chosen me, even when I gave you every reason not to. His voice roughened. These initials aren't about possession. They're about partnership, about acknowledging that what comes next, whatever we build together, is just as much yours as mine. She was quiet for so long he started to worry he'd miscalculated. Then she laughed, a slightly watery sound. You're still an idiot. A brilliant, terrifying, occasionally romantic idiot. Relief flooded through him. Is that a yes? Will you wear it? On one condition. She looked up from the watch, her eyes suspiciously bright. This watch stays with me, not as a loan, not as something you can reclaim if we fight or if I make you angry. It's mine. It's yours. He agreed immediately. Completely yours. I had my attorney draw up papers transferring legal ownership. It's in your name now, along with insurance documentation and provenance records. Her eyebrows rose. You gave me a multi-million-dollar family heirloom with legal paperwork? I wanted you to know I meant it. That this isn't a gesture I can take back when I get scared or irrational. You own this, legally and actually. He pulled out his phone, showing her the scanned documents. It's yours, Keaton, no strings, no conditions except that you understand what it represents. She studied the papers, then looked back at the watch. What does it represent? That you're family now. Not just professionally, not just romantically, actually family. Part of the legacy, part of the story, part of everything that comes next. He took a breath. And that I trust you with it. With all of it. The history, the responsibility, the weight of what this represents. Tears spilled over then, tracking down her cheeks, and Tanner froze. He'd made women cry before, but never in a way that felt like this, vulnerable and raw, and somehow beautiful. Hey, no. He reached out, then stopped, unsure if touching her was allowed. I didn't mean to. Shut up. She wiped at her face, laughing through the tears. These are happy tears, you idiot. This is... She looked down at the watch again, her voice breaking. This is the most thoughtful thing anyone's ever done for me. The tightness in his chest eased. Yeah? Yeah. She picked up the watch, fastening it carefully around her wrist. The platinum was slightly too large for her, the way his grandfather's watch would be, but she adjusted it until it sat comfortably. How does it look? Perfect. He meant it. Seeing his family's legacy on her wrist felt right in a way he couldn't articulate. Completely perfect. She studied the watch for a moment longer, then launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. The sudden contact startled him, but he recovered quickly, his arms coming up to hold her close. She smelled like vanilla and something herbal, and the weight of her against his chest made something settle in his soul. Thank you, she whispered against his neck. For trying, for changing, for proving that you're not just the man who exploded over jealousy, but someone capable of this. I'm still going to mess up, he warned, his hands moving in slow circles on her back. I'm still going to feel possessive sometimes, still going to want to eliminate threats and control variables. I know. She pulled back enough to look at him, her hands cupping his face. But you're also going to communicate about it. You're going to ask for help instead of just reacting. You're going to keep trying to be better. I will. The promise came easily now, every day. She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Not the desperate collision from Singapore, but something steadier. Something that tasted like future instead of just present. He let her control the pace, following her lead, content to exist in this moment without needing to push for more. When she pulled back, her smile was radiant. So, what now? Now we figure it out together. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. No scripts, no predetermined outcomes. Just, us. Us, she repeated, like she was testing the word. I like the sound of that. Me too. And he did. For the first time in his life, the uncertainty didn't feel threatening. It felt like possibility. They spent the rest of the afternoon in her apartment, talking about nothing important, her favorite books, his complete inability to cook, the ridiculous plot of a TV show she was watching. Normal conversation between two people who were figuring out how to be together without the weight of professional obligations or dramatic confrontations. At some point, she ordered takeout, and they ate directly from the containers, while she explained the complex political dynamics of her favorite reality show. Tanner found himself genuinely invested in whether someone named Rebecca would confront someone named Stacy about a betrayal involving a shared alliance. "I can't believe you're actually paying attention," Keaton said, laughing as she speared a piece of chicken. "Most people's eyes glaze over when I talk about this show. I like hearing you talk." The admission came out before he could filter it. "About anything, everything. I like learning what interests you outside of work." Her expression softened. "That's surprisingly sweet for someone who once threatened to buy a competing company just because they bid against you. I contain multitudes." He stole a piece of her chicken. "Also, I did buy that company. And they've been very profitable." "Of course you did." But she was smiling. "Do you ever let things go?" "I'm learning to." He thought about the unopened background check, the apology to Gage, the way he'd walked away from the urge to investigate everyone in her life. "It's not natural for me. But I'm learning. That's all I ask." She set aside her food, moving closer to him on the couch. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to keep trying." He pulled her against his side, and she settled there like it was natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. The platinum watch on her wrist caught the light, 4 sets of initials, creating a legacy that was no longer about control but about choice. "Keaton?" He spoke into her hair. Thank you for not giving up on me. For seeing the potential for something better underneath all the chaos." She tilted her head back to look at him. "Thank you for being willing to change. Not everyone would." They stayed like that as evening faded into night, the TV playing something neither of them were really watching, comfortable in each other's presence. And for the first time since the explosion on the jet, Tanner felt something he hadn't expected. Peace. Not the peace of having everything under control, but the peace of trusting someone else to help carry the weight. The peace of partnership instead of possession. It was, he thought as Keaton's breathing evened out into sleep against his shoulder, infinitely better than anything he could have controlled or commanded. This her trust, her choice, her presence was earned, and that made it priceless. Returning to work after everything that had happened felt like stepping into an alternate reality where everyone was pretending nothing had changed. Tanner arrived at the office at his usual time, reviewed his usual reports, attended his usual meetings, but everything was different now, and the weight of the platinum watch now resting in Keaton's possession felt like a declaration he wasn't quite ready to make public. Keaton arrived 15 minutes after him, as she always did, her professional mask firmly in place. She wore the watch, but had paired it with a blazer that partially concealed it. A compromise, he realized, present but not prominent. There for him to see but not broadcasting to the entire office. "Good morning, Mr. Ronan." Her tone was pure business as she set his coffee down. "Singapore confirmed the final contract terms. Your signatures are required on pages 4, 17, and 32. Thank you, Miss Ivy." He accepted the folder, careful not to let their fingers touch. The formality felt absurd after spending the previous evening tangled together on her couch, but he understood the necessity. They'd agreed to keep personal and professional separate, at least until they figured out how to integrate them without disrupting everything. The morning passed in familiar rhythms. Keaton managed his schedule with her usual efficiency, fielded calls from people who thought they deserved his attention, and appeared in his office doorway at precise intervals with updates and questions. To anyone watching, they were exactly what they'd always been, a highly effective professional partnership, but there were small moments that told a different story. The way she smiled when she thought no one was looking, the way his eyes followed her movements across his office, the way they both found reasons to pass by each other in the hallway, creating brief moments of proximity that felt electric despite their careful distance. His CFO noticed first. Margaret Chen had worked with Tanner long enough to read his moods, and she'd clearly detected the shift. "So," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk during their afternoon financial review, "are you going to tell me what changed, or am I supposed to pretend I don't notice you're actually smiling?" Tanner looked up from the quarterly reports. "I smile. You show teeth sometimes when you're about to destroy someone's negotiating position. That's not the same as smiling." Margaret leaned back, studying him with unsettling intensity. "This is different. You're different. What happened in Singapore?" "We closed the deal successfully." He kept his tone neutral. Everything went according to plan. Bullshit. Margaret had never been one for workplace diplomacy. I've known you for 12 years, Tanner. You don't do relaxed. You don't do content. You definitely don't do whatever this is. She gestured vaguely at him. So either tell me what's going on, or at least confirm you're not having a medical crisis. The urge to deflect was strong, but Margaret was right. She'd earned honesty through years of loyalty and discretion. Things are changing. Personally. It's affecting my outlook. Personally. Her eyebrows rose. As in, you've discovered you have a personal life? Something like that. She was quiet for a moment. Then her expression sharpened. This wouldn't have anything to do with why you completely lost your mind and canceled a major business meeting to interrogate your assistant on a jet, would it? Of course she knew. Margaret knew everything that happened in his organization. That was why he paid her an obscene salary and gave her unlimited authority over financial decisions. It might, he admitted. Jesus. Tanner. She rubbed her temples. Please tell me you didn't harass Keaton into a relationship. Please tell me I don't have to explain hostile work environment regulations to a man with 3 law degrees. It's not like that. He set down his pen, giving her his full attention. She's not my subordinate in this. He struggled for the right word. We're figuring something out. Together. With clear boundaries and mutual respect. Margaret studied him skeptically. And Keaton consents to this? Freely and without coercion? Yes. The question stung, but he understood why she was asking. I know my track record isn't great. I know I tend to steamroll people. But this is different. She made the rules. She's setting the pace. I'm just trying to keep up and not fuck it up. Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Margaret's expression softened slightly. Well, good. Because Keaton's the best assistant you've ever had, and if you drove her away with your particular brand of intensity, I'd have to hurt you. Noted. Also. She stood, gathering her files. For what it's worth. Whatever's happening, it's good for you. You've been wound tighter than a spring for years. It's about time something made you remember you're human. After she left, Tanner sat in the quiet of his office, processing the conversation. It was strange, having people notice the change in him. Strange but not entirely unpleasant. Maybe this was what growth looked like from the outside, visible shifts in behavior that signaled internal transformation. His phone buzzed. A text from Keaton. Meeting in conference room A moved to 4 p.m. You have 30 minutes free at 3:30 if you want to grab coffee. The message was perfectly professional, but the offer underneath it wasn't. 30 minutes alone, away from the office, in a public space where they could just be 2 people without the weight of professional obligations. He typed back. Sounds good. Meet you in the lobby. At 3:25, he took the elevator down to the ground floor. Keaton was already there, her blazer removed and draped over her arm, the platinum watch now fully visible on her wrist. She smiled when she saw him. A real smile that made something warm settle in his chest. There's a new place 2 blocks over, she said as they stepped outside. Supposed to have excellent espresso. They walked in comfortable silence, navigating the afternoon foot traffic. No one paid them particular attention, just 2 professionals among thousands in the financial district. But Tanner was hyper-aware of every detail. The way she adjusted her stride to match his, the soft sound of her breathing, the occasional brush of her sleeve against his arm. The coffee shop was small and relatively quiet, tucked between 2 larger buildings. They ordered espresso for him, a cappuccino for her, and found a table near the window. So, Keaton said, wrapping her hands around her mug. Margaret knows. How did you... She pulled me aside after your meeting, asked if I was okay, if I needed HR support, if you'd done anything that required immediate intervention and possible termination. Keaton's lips quirked. I assured her this was mutual and consensual, and that you're actually behaving yourself. Actually behaving myself? Well, you haven't bought any companies this week, or threatened anyone with bodily harm. That's progress. She sipped her cappuccino. But she's right to be concerned. We need to be careful about how this affects the workplace dynamic. We are being careful. He kept his voice low. We're maintaining professional boundaries. We're not showing favoritism. We're sneaking off for coffee in the middle of the afternoon. But her tone was amused. Tanner, people are going to notice eventually. We need to decide how we want to handle that. The truth of it settled over him. They couldn't exist in this liminal space forever, pretending to be purely professional while also building something personal. Eventually, they'd have to make a choice, public or private, acknowledged or hidden. What do you want? he asked. Full transparency? Keep it private until we're sure? Something in between? She considered this, turning her mug between her hands. I want authenticity. I don't want to lie to people or pretend we're something we're not. But I also don't want our relationship to become office gossip or to undermine my professional credibility. So what does that look like practically? I think, she paused, clearly thinking it through. I think we need to separate my role, create a different position that isn't directly subordinate to you. Give me projects and autonomy that don't require your approval for every decision. That way, when we do acknowledge the relationship, it's not about a boss dating his assistant. It's about two people who work together but aren't in a power dynamic. The suggestion was smart, protecting both of them while also giving Keaton what she'd asked for in Singapore: her own projects, her own autonomy, her own professional identity outside of managing his chaos. What kind of position? He was already mentally restructuring his organizational chart. I was thinking chief of staff. Someone who coordinates across departments, manages special projects, reports directly to you but isn't responsible for your daily calendar and personal needs. She met his eyes. Someone who has real authority and decision-making power. Done. The agreement came immediately. I'll have HR draw up the job description. We can announce it next week. Just like that? She looked surprised. You're not going to argue or negotiate or tell me it's too complicated. Why would I? He genuinely didn't understand her surprise. You've been functioning at that level for months anyway. This just makes it official and gives you the compensation and respect you deserve. She studied him for a long moment. You're really serious about the partnership thing? I am. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing the platinum watch on her wrist. You're wearing my family's legacy, Keaton. That means something. It means I trust you with decisions that affect not just me, but everything I've built. Chief of staff isn't a gesture. It's acknowledgement of what you've already been doing. Her eyes grew suspiciously bright again. Stop being thoughtful. It's throwing me off. Get used to it. He withdrew his hand, mindful of their public location. I'm a reformed man. Thoughtfulness is my new brand. She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You threatened someone last week and apologized for it. Growth is a process. Fair enough. She finished her cappuccino, then checked her watch. We should get back. Your 4 p.m. is with the board, and you know how they get when you're late. They walked back to the office, maintaining their careful professional distance. But something had shifted. The conversation about her new role, the acknowledgement that they needed to integrate their personal and professional lives thoughtfully, it all felt like forward momentum, like they were building something that could actually last, instead of just reacting to dramatic revelations. The board meeting was exactly as tedious as expected. Tanner sat through 2 hours of financial projections and strategic planning, his mind only half engaged. The other half kept drifting to the platinum watch on Keaton's wrist, to the conversation about her new role, to the 1,000 small ways they were learning to exist in each other's orbits without collision. When the meeting finally ended, he returned to his office to find a folder on his desk marked Chief of Staff Proposed Role Description. Inside was a meticulously detailed job description, complete with salary range, reporting structure, and key responsibilities. Keaton had clearly been thinking about this for a while, planning and preparing for the transition. He pulled out his phone and texted her, "Impressive work, let's implement it." Her response came immediately. "You haven't even read it fully. I trust you. If you think this is the right structure, it is." A pause then. "That's growth. I'm learning from the best." He meant it. Every decision he made now, every choice about how to handle uncertainty or relinquish control, was informed by watching Keaton navigate the world with competence and grace. She was teaching him, whether she realized it or not, how to be the kind of man who could sustain a partnership instead of just commanding submission. The next morning, he sent the job description to HR with instructions to process it immediately. By afternoon, Keaton was officially his chief of staff, with a salary increase that reflected her actual value and authority that extended across the entire organization. She appeared in his office doorway, her professional mask in place but her eyes bright. That was fast. No point delaying. He gestured for her to come in. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying and exhilarating." She closed the door behind her, then moved to sit across from his desk. "I have a dozen ideas for projects I want to launch. Efficiency improvements, strategic partnerships, expansion into markets you've been ignoring. Then launch them." He leaned back in his chair. "You have full authority. I trust your judgment." The words clearly meant something to her, because her expression softened. Thank you. For this. For believing I'm capable of more than just managing your schedule. You've always been capable of more. I was just too focused on control to let you show it. He stood, moving around his desk to lean against it, closer to where she sat. This is me fixing that mistake. She looked up at him, and the air between them charged with the awareness they'd been carefully managing all day. They were alone now, the door closed, the office quiet. The space between professional and personal suddenly felt very thin. Tanner. Her voice was soft. I know, office, professional boundaries. But he didn't move away. Just let me say one thing. What? I'm proud of you. For building this role, for knowing what you need, for not settling for being just my assistant when you're capable of so much more. He held her gaze. You're extraordinary, Keaton. And I'm grateful every day that you chose me despite every reason not to. The mask slipped then, revealing the woman underneath, the one who'd cried over a watch engraving, who'd fallen asleep on his shoulder watching reality TV, who demanded respect and partnership instead of just accepting whatever he offered. We're going to be okay, she said quietly. Aren't we? This is going to work. Yeah. He believed it now. We're going to be okay. She stood, and for a moment they just looked at each other, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Then she smiled that warm, genuine smile that had started this entire mess and headed for the door. Chief of Staff Ivy has work to do, she said over her shoulder. Try not to buy any companies without consulting me first. No promises. But he was smiling as he said it. After she left, Tanner returned to his desk and pulled up the organizational chart, looking at Keaton's new position, Chief of Staff, a role that put her beside him rather than beneath him, that gave her authority and autonomy while still keeping her close. It was perfect, almost as perfect as the woman who would fill it. 6 weeks after the jet incident, Tanner found himself in an unfamiliar position. Nervous. Not the calculated tension of a high-stakes negotiation or the sharp awareness of a potential threat. Just simple, human nervousness about whether Keaton would be pleased with what he'd arranged. He'd asked her to meet him at the private hangar, the same place where everything had exploded. The symbolism was intentional. He wanted to rewrite that memory, to replace the scene of his possessive fury with something better. She arrived exactly on time, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, the platinum watch visible on her wrist. Her expression was curious but guarded, clearly unsure what he had planned. Should I be worried? She asked as she approached. The last time you asked me to meet you at a hangar, things got intense. No explosions this time, he promised, taking her hand. I promise. This is different. He led her toward the jet, but instead of boarding, they walked past it to a smaller aircraft positioned at the far end of the hangar. It was sleek and modern, painted in deep blue with silver accents. Keaton stopped, staring. Tanner. What? It's yours. He pulled out a folder containing registration papers, insurance documents, and the title, Fully Yours. I transferred ownership this morning. She took the folder with shaking hands, flipping through the documents. You bought me a plane. A jet, technically. Smaller than mine, but faster. Perfect for the kind of traveling you'll be doing as Chief of Staff. He moved to stand beside her, looking at the aircraft. And before you argue that it's too much, let me explain the reasoning. Please do. Her tone suggested she was somewhere between amazed and exasperated. You have your own projects now, your own agenda. You need independence, the ability to travel without coordinating with my schedule, or waiting for my jet to be available. He turned to face her. This isn't about control or possession. It's about enabling your autonomy. You want projects? You need the tools to execute them effectively. She studied the jet, then looked back at the papers, then at him. This is insane. Maybe. He couldn't read her expression. Is it also insulting? I'm genuinely asking. I don't want this to feel like I'm trying to buy your affection or... It's not insulting. She cut him off, her voice thick with emotion. It's terrifying and thoughtful and completely over the top, but it's not insulting. She looked at the registration papers again. It's really in my name, not the company's. Your name, personally owned. You can do whatever you want with it, sell it, keep it, paint it purple and use it exclusively for vacation. It's yours. I'm not going to paint it purple. The option exists. She laughed, the sound slightly watery. You're impossible. I prefer learning to express affection through practical gifts rather than possessive declarations. He moved closer. Is it working? Unfortunately, yes. She set the folder down on a nearby work table, then turned to fully face him. "But you need to understand something. I can't accept a gift like this every time you feel insecure or want to prove something." "I know." He did know. This isn't about proving anything. It's about you needing resources to do your job effectively. The emotional component is just, he struggled for the right words. It's just me wanting you to have something that's entirely yours. That represents your success, your capabilities, your independence from me. She studied him for a long moment. "You've really thought this through." "I've had Margaret and my attorney review it 3 times to make sure there's no way it could be construed as inappropriate or compromising to your professional standing." He pulled out his phone, showing her email threads with his legal team. "It's a legitimate business tool for a legitimate business purpose. The fact that it also makes me happy to give it to you is just a bonus. Show me the inside." The request came out soft. He led her up the stairs into the cabin. It was smaller than his jet, but beautifully appointed leather seats, modern technology, a compact but functional workspace, everything designed for efficiency and comfort. Keaton moved through the space, running her hands over the seats, examining the controls, opening storage compartments. "This is really mine?" "Every inch of it." He leaned against the doorway, giving her space to explore. "The pilot I've contracted is someone you already know, Gage Leland. He agreed to be your primary pilot, though you'll have a full crew available if he's unavailable." She stopped, turning to stare at him. "You hired Gage? He's qualified. You trust him." And Tanner forced himself to be honest. "I need to prove I can work with people who are important to you, even when it's uncomfortable for me." Hiring him for your jet felt like a good start. Something shifted in her expression. "You're really trying. Every day." He moved into the cabin, closing the distance between them. "I'm not perfect at it. I still have moments where I want to lock you away somewhere safe and eliminate every variable that makes me nervous. But I'm trying to recognize those impulses and redirect them into something productive. Like buying me a jet, like enabling your independence." The distinction mattered. "Keaton, I don't want to be the kind of man who loves someone by caging them. I want to be the kind who loves someone by giving them wings. Even when," his voice roughened, "even when it terrifies me." She closed the remaining space between them, her hands coming up to frame his face. "I love you." The words hit him with unexpected force. She'd implied it before, had shown it through actions, but hearing it said plainly, in the middle of this moment, made everything real in a way it hadn't been. "I love you too." The confession came easier than he expected. "I've probably loved you since the moment you told me my jealousy was childish, and I needed to communicate like a functional adult." She laughed. "That's your romantic origin story? Me calling you childish. You were the first person in years to tell me the truth instead of what I wanted to hear. How could I not fall in love with that?" She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Not the desperate collision of early attraction, but something steadier. Something that tasted like partnership and trust and the 1,000 small decisions they'd made to choose each other. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "So, I own a jet." "You own a jet? And you hired my friend to pilot it?" "I did. And you had 3 separate legal reviews to make sure this couldn't be misconstrued as inappropriate." Margaret was very insistent. She shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're absurd. Is that a yes? You'll accept it?" "On one condition." She held up a finger. "The first place I fly in this jet is somewhere I choose. Not a business trip you've arranged. Not a destination that serves your purposes. Somewhere I want to go, just because. Deal." He'd agree to anything at this point. "Where do you want to go?" She considered this, her expression thoughtful. "I've always wanted to see the northern lights. Iceland, maybe. Somewhere remote and beautiful and completely impractical for business. Then Iceland it is." He pulled out his phone. "When?" "Next month. Give me time to finalize some of my projects." She took the phone from his hands, setting it aside. "But right now, I just want to enjoy this moment. No planning, no strategizing. Just this." They stood in the quiet cabin of her jet, a thought that still felt surreal wrapped in each other, the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Outside, the hangar continued its usual rhythms, but inside this small space, everything felt suspended. Perfect. Complete. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for the jet, for everything. For trying, for changing, for proving that the man who exploded over a watch isn't all you are. Thank you for not giving up on me." He pressed a kiss to her temple. foreseeing the potential for something better. They stayed like that for a while, just existing in each other's presence. Eventually, they'd have to return to the office, to the real world with its complications and demands. But for now, in this moment, they had everything that mattered. A partnership built on choice, a love built on respect, and a jet, because apparently that's how Tanner Ronan expressed affection when he wasn't exploding over jewelry. It was, Keaton thought with amusement, perfectly absurd and perfectly them. Iceland in winter was exactly as beautiful and impractical as Keaton had imagined. They'd flown commercial for this trip. Her jet was still being outfitted with cold weather modifications, and the change of pace felt liberating. No security detail, no business associates, just two people on vacation. They'd rented a small cabin outside Reykjavik, positioned perfectly for northern lights viewing. The first 2 nights had been cloudy, obscuring the aurora, but tonight the sky was clear, and the forecast was favorable. Tanner stood outside in the frigid air, his breath fogging, watching Keaton adjust the camera settings. She'd been planning this shot for weeks, researching the best techniques for capturing the lights. Her dedication to learning something entirely new, just because it interested her, made something warm settle in his chest. There, she pointed at the horizon, where green began to streak across the sky. It's starting. The aurora built slowly, ribbons of green and purple dancing across the darkness. Keaton took shot after shot, occasionally pausing to just watch, her expression full of wonder. Tanner found himself watching her more than the lights, the way her eyes reflected the colors, the small smile playing at her lips, the complete absorption in the moment. "You're not even looking," she said without turning around. "I'm looking at something better." That's cheesy. True, though. He moved to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "The lights are beautiful, but you're more interesting." She leaned back against him, still watching the sky. 3 months ago, you were having a breakdown over a watch. Now you're voluntarily standing in sub-zero temperatures watching natural phenomena. What happened to you? I met someone who demanded I become better than I was. He pressed a kiss to her neck. Turns out, being better feels pretty good, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. He meant it. The last few months had been full of moments where his instinct was to control or possess or eliminate variables. But each time, he'd forced himself to pause, to communicate, to trust Keaton's judgment. And each time, the outcome had been better than what his fear had predicted. The aurora intensified, painting the sky in brilliant colors. They watched in silence for a while, the cold seeping through their layers, but neither willing to go inside. "I have something for you," Keaton said eventually. She pulled away, moving back inside the cabin. When she returned, she held a small wrapped box. "It's not my birthday," he said, accepting it. "I know, but it felt right." She watched as he opened it, revealing a simple platinum watch, not ornate like his grandfather's heirloom, but clean and modern. On the back was a simple engraving, "Choice over control, forever. K.I." The message hit him hard. This wasn't about possession or legacy or dramatic declarations. It was about the principle they'd both committed to, that their relationship existed because they chose it, every day, rather than because anyone had been commanded or coerced or claimed. "Keaton," his voice came out rough, "you gave me your family's legacy. I wanted to give you something that represents ours." She moved closer. "Not the history you inherited, but the future we're building, together." He put on the watch, the platinum warm against his skin. It fit perfectly, like it had been made specifically for him. Which, he realized, it probably had been. "I love you." The words came easily now. More than I knew it was possible to love someone. "I love you too." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "Even when you're an unhinged idiot who threatens people over jewelry." That was one time, one very memorable time. But she was smiling. Though I have to admit, the jealousy was kind of attractive, in a completely toxic way that you're never allowed to repeat. Noted. He pulled her closer, both of them watching as the aurora continued its dance. "What now?" "Now we go inside before we get hypothermia." She tugged him toward the cabin. "And then we figure out the next adventure. Maybe somewhere warm next time. Anywhere you want." He meant it. "Just tell me where, and we'll go." Inside the cabin, they shed their layers and settled by the fire. Keaton pulled out her camera, scrolling through the shots she'd taken. The aurora looked spectacular, but Tanner found himself more interested in the candid shot she'd taken of him earlier, his expression unguarded, genuinely relaxed in a way that would have been impossible months ago. "You look different," she observed. noticing his focus. I am different. He studied the photo. You changed me. You changed yourself. I just provided motivation. She set the camera aside, moving to curl against his side. But I'm glad you did. This version of you is much easier to love. Only easier? The unhinged version had its charms too. She grinned up at him. Limited charms. Very specific charms. Charms that should never be repeated. You're never going to let me live that down. Never. But her tone was affectionate. It's part of our story now. The time you completely lost your mind over a watch, and somehow it worked out. He laughed, the sound genuine and unforced. Not the most romantic origin story. I don't know. It's pretty memorable. She traced the engraving on his new watch. Besides, what matters isn't how we started, it's what we're building now. And what are we building? He was genuinely curious how she'd describe it. Partnership. Trust. A life where we're both better together than we were apart. She met his eyes. The kind of love that makes us stronger instead of smaller. It was perfect. Simple and true, and exactly what he'd been trying to articulate, but couldn't find words for. This was what he'd been afraid of losing back on that jet, not just Keaton herself, but the possibility of this. Of being known completely and loved anyway. Of choosing and being chosen in return. I like that, he said quietly. Let's build that. We already are. Outside, the aurora continued to dance, nature's light show providing a backdrop to their quiet moment. But neither of them was watching anymore. They had everything they needed right there, two people who'd found their way through jealousy and fear and possessive fury to something infinitely better. Something built on choice instead of control. Something worth holding on to. Not because it was claimed or commanded, but because every day, they both chose to stay. And that made all the difference.